About 3 years ago, I got really into virtual photography. It's the use of photomotor camera tools in video games to frame and compose interesting shots. And on my journey through Ghost of Tsushima, I inadvertently froze the frame just as an NPC turned to look at me, and it sparked a kind of recognition in my brain. So I snapped a photo of the moment, and I followed him around for a bit, and I imagined what his life might be like. And then I tried the same thing in other games. I paid extra attention to clothing, character design, behavior patterns that I thought might go unnoticed by the average player. And here's what I learned in Japan Studios' Gravity Rush 2 is probably the game that made me feel the most rewarded for actively paying attention. See, like any other video game, it reuses character models all the time. And like any other game, you get some weird coincidences as a result. Like, this one lady will ask you to help her find her son. And then you might ask, "Hey, have you seen this woman's son?" to a passerby who looks just like her. I only tell you this because unlike any other game, Gravity Rush does certain things to make these kinds of interactions feel like the exception rather than the norm. Let me explain. The character models have certain traits or story vignettes or relationships unique to them that consistently re-emerge throughout the game, usually way in the background, and I love it so much. So for example, I would photograph a random student who sometimes hangs around the city with a camera, and sometimes without. And then, when a side quest would later ask me to track down the reporter for the school paper, I'd have a pretty good instinct about who it would be long before I saw him. And guess what? I was right! Towards the end of the game, you can even find him for some optional dialogue about his work again. Once I realized these connections existed, I started obsessively looking through my camera roll, trying to trace who was who without the game explicitly telling me, and I think I was pretty successful. Gravity Rush made me feel actively rewarded for paying attention to minute details. So, consider this example. There's this one side quest, "One day this crush will end." You're tasked with following around this girl's crappy boyfriend who's meeting with another woman behind her back. You need to find out who the woman he's secretly seeing is. You can find out the normal way via a scripted cutscene, or you can find out just for yourself a little bit before that. Do some people watching around the area and you'll spot one NPC who's fidgeting and checking her watch, and just giving off the most anxious vibes. Place your bets, head to the objective marker, and find out if your instincts were right when the next scenes play out. Because it's entirely possible that they will be. Also, you should know, the side quest is a huge misunderstanding. The boyfriend is meeting her in secret to buy a wedding ring from her for his current girlfriend. Once that's all resolved, he proposes and wins her love back. Next, I'll direct your attention to these two students. They hang out together a lot, so it's a pretty safe bet they're best friends. You can find an optional conversation in which they're sitting together in a weird trance, predicting the end of the world. And true to form, a later side quest has you seeking out some girls who've ended up as part of a demon-worshipping cult together. Guess who they are? These two girls are also paired as besties, frequently seen about town together. A recurring theme with them is how wholesome they are towards your player character Cat. And when my adoring fans guessed, correctly, that I might be a certain mystery singer, and when Cat turned down their request to sing a few bars for them, well, I doubled back. And I'm glad I did. Hey, you wanna hear about my favorite though? There's this side quest towards the end of the game where you have to escort an old man around the city. He asks you to take him to his favorite church, but he and Kat back out of getting too close because they learn there's a wedding happening there. Okay. He marks a different spot on your map to take him to. But you can ignore him and go check out the wedding. And guess who you'll find getting married? There's no dialogue, no cutscene, no recognition, and yet I recognize them. The character models of the couple from One Day This Crush Will End. Just standing there arm in arm, wrapping up their story in the background of a different quest. And the game doesn't make a big deal out of it. In all of these examples, it never does. Japan's studio just leaves these patterns there for anyone who wants to find them to find them. And for those who aren't interested, they'll play the game as they see fit. There isn't a lot of information available about who placed these details, but in a 2018 interview with Gravity Rush Central, director Keiichiro Toyama and scenario writers Naoko Sato and Eric Bailey talk more about their roles as writers. Sato states, "The scenario designers take the various story points we need to make and come up with ideas for getting those into the game through mission design," with Bailey adding there is always a choice between whether to convey those story beats through cutscenes, dialogue, captions, etc. One interesting detail he reveals is that side quests are timed to trigger according to where Kat is in her personal journey. This is perhaps why they managed to maintain a chronology throughout Gravity Rush 2's background. Take the side quest, Thus Spoke the Adventurer, where you help a young boy relive his memories of his late grandfather by revisiting places from photos. The quest ends with him realizing his grandfather wanted him to go on adventures, yes, but he also wanted him to have a good education.
Large. Oh.
At the end of Gravity Rush 2, one of Kat's friends, Yuji, gets into the prestigious Arquebus Academy, and when you speak to him, you might notice that one of his new friends is that same boy, talking about his grandfather. Note another side quest, The Machineries of Joy, in which Sid asks Kat to make a robot arm the kids in the Banga settlement can play with. Whenever you're free roaming and happen to drop by the settlement from that point on, you can find one of the kids still hauling the arm around. Gravity Rush 2 uses an in-game camera that canonically belongs to Kat, as opposed to a photo mode. The photo options are a bit limited, but through the protagonist's flying and gravity-bending powers, you can get some really interesting angles. And they all come out in this neat little Polaroid form. I recommend it. Toyama states that the photo mode was partially inspired by Gravity Rush 1's fanbase, where players took a lot of screenshots. Speaking to Gravity Rush Central, he also states that photography is one of his own hobbies, and they decided to make the camera a major feature of the game in multiple ways. It's worth noting at this point that the game does a lot of things to incentivize you to use its camera, to hunt for details using in-game photography. It's a mandatory part of your detective work during One Day This Crush Will End. It's used to study old paintings and secret meetings in other side quests. Most relevantly, there are special NPCs scattered about the cities who you can track down and photograph, based on little story details about them. Like a celebrity spotted just outside the city theater. Or an Academy alumni who returns to visit her old campus from time to time. The camera is also tied to an online photo sharing feature that was, tragically, discontinued in 2018, just a little over a year after the game's release. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't change the fact that the game was designed with its use, with the camera's use in mind. It's a nice way to get acquainted with the differences between its two central cities, Hekseville and Jirga para Lhao, both of which have wildly different architectural and fashion styles. Broadly speaking, NPC costumes in the former have a European flair. In the latter, they lean towards a mix of Latin American and Southeast Asian. JPL was largely inspired by the team's visit to Mexico when promoting the first game.
You know, Toyama-san is awesome at photography too, and when they did a ton of research for this, they were taking pictures of all sorts of locales. So this area, Jirga para Lhao, is based off of South American trip that they had, and just lots of different architecture from that area, so cool. There
are distinctions within the cities too, of course. In Hekseville, the entertainment district of Plejun has certain characters hobbling around on drunken walk cycles, which you won't see anywhere else in the city. Arquebus Academy is almost exclusively occupied by students, including this one I tried to take a photo with, and this one, jamming on his guitar. There are musicians in Jirga para Lhao too, violinists, and even an accordionist who plays Cat's song. I had less luck singing with him because he got so impressed he dropped his instrument, then blamed me for it. JPL also boasts street performers and balloon vendors, but fly to the higher levels of the city where the wealthy 1% live, and you'll find far less hustle and bustle, far more fancy clothing, calm strolls in the park. You can actually find concept art of Gravity Rush 2's Jirga para Lhao Council in the original Gravity Rush, showing how much of its story was planned ahead. And on a final note, the food vendor in Gravity Rush 2 who offers you a free skewer for your trouble, you can actually find him in the Gravity Rush anime when said trouble first happened. Voila! Continuity.
Oh, Shishuri! Ove parte du, ove marini potu uya, mazinga palario, biena ubule.
Hey! Thanks so much for watching that. This was actually an excerpt from a much longer video, in which I go over even more games and NPCs I photographed in 2021. I've included a link in the description below, along with links to the social media pages where I post my photos. I also make video essays, right here, on YouTube, so if you like my stuff, consider subscribing. Thank you again for sticking around, and I'll see you, or I guess you'll see me, in the next one.